Hello! Okay, today we're going to look at some basics for setting up EveHQ for doing blueprint research and for doing some production. Let's start up EveHQ here. Now I'm running the current beta build of the software, which for some of this I definitely recommend. Okay, when EveHQ first starts up, you have the dashboard here, which if you just installed it will probably be empty. You can just right-click here, go to Configure Dashboard, and then you can, and then you can add whatever widgets or other items you want here, move them around and everything. But the first thing you're going to have to do when you first install EveHQ here is you're going to want to go into Settings. You'll probably get prompted to do this when you first start it up, but in case you need to add something else, you're going to go to the... where are they? The accounts here. Okay. Now what you'll be doing here is you'll be adding an account set up with an API key. You do that from the Eve support website. If you've never done that before, I'll show you here how you set this up. It's relatively easy. Again, you can use, there'll be a link right here. You can just click on, or you can go to support.eveonline.com and select API keys. Now what you'll have here for EveHQ, you'll pretty much want to put in absolutely everything here. So you can just select all. This is how you'll mask what information is available in the API key that you're setting it up. You'll give the API key a name and select what characters on the account you want to go. And if you have access rights, you can also set up a corporate API key. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the meat of what we're going to be doing here. First, also, after you get your API key set up, you'll want to update the API information. Okay, all of our data is set up. A lot of what we're going to be doing here is going to take place in the Prism plugin right here. Okay, now the main window here for Prism, you have listings of the API information, and when different parts of the API you can refresh more frequently than others. Right now, like the Assets API can only be updated once every 12 hours at present, I believe. But so after coming here, you'll want to again update the data. And this process can take a little while. But while that's going, let's take a look here at some of the Prism settings. What you'll be doing here is setting up basics of what the defaults are going to be, who you're going to have your default blueprint owner if you have multiple owners like yourself or your corporation. Okay, the update finished. Who's going to be your default builder of all the APIs that you have put in. Who's going to be the default asset owner, and the overall default Prism character. And then for column layouts, you can select what information you're going to want to show. For corp reps, you can put in different things on who's going to have assets, that type stuff. I haven't really used this very much, so we'll come back to that later at a later date. And for costs, you can set up default costs for factory slots and lab slots and that information. Okay. But now that we've got all of that in, let's go here into the blueprint calculator. And what you're going to want to do is first select a character. Now, this listing is already populated here, but when you first start it up, it will look empty like this. The first thing you're going to want to do is click over here on Update Blueprints from Assets. This will look at the Assets API for what your character has, and it'll pull into here any blueprints. But when you first do that, the blueprints you pull in will not have any of the ME or PE data, or if they're copies, it will all default to just one run on those copies. This happens because of no fault of the program, but it's because of the way CCP stores the blueprint data in the game's database. The ME and PE levels for a blueprint are not actually part of the same database entry. That's all stored separately in another area where the API can't get at it. But there are a couple of ways around that. Here, what the programmer has done for EveHQ is they've gone in and the API key here can look at your job history. So you can do is click over here on Get BP Info from Jobs. That will update any ME and PE levels from any jobs that you've done. That won't affect copies, but it could affect your originals. But if you researched your originals in a corporate lab slot at a POS, for example, then that will not show up in here unless you have access to a corporate API key. In that case, what you're going to have to do is go over here, highlight a blueprint, and select, right-click, and select Amend Blueprint Details. Now then here what you can do is you can set the ME level, the PE level, and all of that to whatever is needed, or whatever it actually is. You can also set the number of runs. Also here, if you see -1 for number of runs, that's the default value for an original. -1 indicating that it has infinite runs. And then the status. Blueprints here have several different statuses. There's present. That means it's currently sitting in your inventory. Missing. That means you've previously had that blueprint in your inventory, but it's not there now. And exhausted. Exhausted shows up for blueprint copies where you've used up all of the runs on them. And a quick note, if you have a blueprint that's currently being used to make something, or if it's being researched, it will show up in here with the red highlight as missing. That's because the blueprint's no longer in your inventory, but it's being stored in whatever slot it's being worked on in. It will show back up here again once the job finishes. And the other thing you can do here is, say you want to look at something or keep in mind a blueprint that you don't have, but you want to see what it looks like. What you can do then is click over here and add custom blueprint. And for example here, let's just go hog wild and put in, say you want to eventually look at what it would cost you to build a Nix supercarrier. And you put in here the basic ME and PE levels for the blueprint and click accept. Now if we scroll down here, you'll see a Nix blueprint in the list here. The custom blueprints show up as being located in your secret stash because you don't really have them, but they will. But this way you can look at them in the blueprint calculator and all of that, look at profitability, and run all of those numbers. And then also here in the list, if you right-click on anything, you can just remove. Okay. So now that we have our listings for blueprints here, let's take a look at the next step in here, which is also one of the real big meats, is the blueprint calculator. Now you can get into this one of two ways. You can either right-click on a blueprint, or, excuse me, not right-click, double left-click on a blueprint, and it'll open it up in the blueprint calculator. There we go. Now, and over here, there are several things in the calculator that are to keep an eye on. First here is owned blueprints. This is checked here. That means that whatever you type in here or show up in the list of blueprints, this list will only contain and only show up in searches for blueprints that you actually own. And you can pull down here to change the owner. And then under pilot and skill selection, you select whoever pilot's skills are going to be used to calculate everything that goes on here. And then down, you can also check here to override any skills here to see what it would look like with different skills. Okay, now when you start here, it's going to be in the research tab. What the research tab here shows you is what it would be to do any research on this blueprint, how long it's going to take you. Like, for example, right now this blueprint already has an ME of 150. So let's see what it would cost to research this up to, say, 160. Okay, so for this character, doing that is going to take 5 days, 22 hours, and roughly 13 minutes. Now, if you check here, research at a pause, that'll change it to 4 days, 10 hours, because any of the laboratories at a pause will give you bonuses to how long it takes. And the same goes if you want to do any PE research on it. Now, in the third here, again, we have here runs per copy. So to make a copy of this blueprint, one run would take 10 hours. To make 5 would take 2 days and 2 hours. And the other checkbox here, if you're doing it at a pause, you can put it into an advanced lab, which, as you see, will also do a further bonus on how long it would take to do that. Okay. So now let's go over to the production tab. Now, before we go over here, actually, I'm going to cancel out of this and go over back here to... Now, with different components of EveHQ, they show up here in nice little tabs for organizing. We're going to go back to the main dashboard and go into the Market Prices module. Now, if you don't download the beta, this will look a little bit different. And if you do download the beta, which I recommend, you'll get this setup. What you can do in this screen here is, first we'll take a look at the settings. Okay. And now we have, in the beta here, they've overhauled the whole prices system. That's the biggest benefit that the beta currently has. One, you have two options here for the data provider. Both come through Eve Central, but the method is different. If you go here with EveHQ bulk downloads, then pricing data will be downloaded in bulk each time you start up the program. What this does is it speeds up any queries and calculators and that type of stuff further down the road. But the prices being used could be slightly off. For example, the things in the market can change sometimes pretty quickly. And especially on large builds, even a price change of an ISK or two for a mineral can have a significant impact on what it's going to cost you. Or the other option here is Eve Central Live Queries. Now this also gives you more options. for where you're going to get your pricing data from. If we go back here to bulk builds, and we go use region and specific systems. So for bulk download, Cheetah is the only system available. But if we go over here to live queries, you can specify to look at either any particular region overall to get your prices, or you can select any individual star system in all of New Eden to get your price data from. Cheetah is usually a good place because the most trade goes on there, so it'll give you a good idea of what some of the values for a lot of things are. Though some items will be a little bit cheaper or a little more expensive in different regions. Like, for example, if you're going to be buying or getting all of your resources in Galente space, then you'll probably want to be looking at Dodixie instead of Cheetah. And the other thing you have here is your default transaction types. We're going to be setting here to look at sell orders and look at the minimum prices. So that way it's basically going to be basing any material prices off of whatever the lowest sell order currently is. Okay. So we'll just click OK here. And the other thing you can do here once you get that set up is say, let's take a look at what prices are on Armageddon's currently. Click Get Market Orders. And these are the current orders available in Cheetah for an Armageddon. Okay. So now we've got that set up here. Oh, there's also another tab here, sorry. Custom prices. If you're doing these updates, you will probably only use this for particular items that there are not much of on the market, or where you want to set a specific price overriding any of the live pricing downloads. So, like for example here, if I click Show Only Custom Prices, like here we have some items where I have put in a customized price because nothing was showing up. And I actually have one here that I currently want to delete the custom price of. Like for these here, like some capital ships, you don't see them very much, or they're also available typically a lot on contract. So in some cases here, the contract price is a lot lower than the market prices. So I've put in that price here. But okay, so back over here to Prism now. And let's open up the blueprint calculator. Okay. Now, what's a good item here to look at? Well, to start off with, I'm going to uncheck owned blueprints because I want to get just a basic run-of-the-mill blueprint off the markets that's not going to have any research on it. Let's take a look at antimatter large ammo. There. Now, because I'm doing live updates, that took a little bit longer to come up. Let's take a look over at the production tab. Okay. Now, there are several areas here to look with. First, we have the build time, which is giving us the total build time for the entire batch, or for one batch, and then the total build time, which is related over here to the number of production runs. Like, say if I want to make 6 runs, that means we're going to have 4 minutes per run and a total of 24 minutes. Now, you might have noticed here also down below, at one run, the profitability is showing a loss of 7.72 ISK per item, or per round of ammo. That's because of the manufacturing costs of mainly the factory install costs. Factory costs are based on an install and then an hourly rate. And we also have here profit loss, and this is listed in per hour. So if you really want to get the most accurate numbers here, you'll want to make sure that your total build time is close to some multiple of 1 hour that you can get. It's like 1 hour, 2 hours. Those are the points where you'll get your maximum notations on the numbers here. And then you have over here your profit margin and your markup values. Those are based off of the total costs here that you're going to have to build the entire batch. In this case, it would cost us 252,000 ISK. And right here you have your unit cost. That's what it's costing you to produce one unit, or one round of ammo in this case, which is 168.37 ISK. And here, the current sales price in JITA is 169.98 ISK. Now, whenever you see an icon like this in here, you can click on it, and this would allow you to enter in a custom price. But if you ever enter a custom price, you're going to have to go back over to market prices and custom prices if you ever want to remove that custom price. That's the only area where you can do that. Okay. So now let's take a look here down below. Right now we're in production resources. These are the resources needed to build our batch of 15 runs of large antimatter. You need isogen, mexilon, pyrite, and tritanium. Now what we have here is the perfect quantity. That's how much would be needed for a perfect version of this BP and your skills, and the amount of additional waste for each that's needed. And then the total amounts for each. And the price on the market currently for each item per unit, and then the total amount of ISK needed if you were to buy each of these items, or the total value of the minerals that you have going into this if you had mined them. Now the final column here is the most important one. This is the ideal material level, or ideal ME level, for this blueprint for that item. Now what that means is if you have your production efficiency skill at level 5, when this blueprint is researched to this ME level, there will be 0 waste for that item. Like for example here, my character has production efficiency 5. Now watch the waste quantities here as I turn up the material level being researched. Here, when I get here to 5, our isogen amount goes to 0 waste. And then when we get up here to 16, the mexilon will go to 0. And so on. And a lot of blueprints you'll find, all this works on a rounded logarithmic scale. What that means is for each level that you research, the next level will provide less benefit than researching the one before it. For example, you can see here when I'm going from level 30, it doesn't change. The amount of tritanium wasted doesn't change again until I get up to level 48, and then it doesn't change again until I get up into the 60s. And then from the 60s it doesn't change till I get up into the hundreds again, and so on. And at a certain point, you will reach a point where the amount of time you're putting into research is not worth the benefit of for example here, of getting rid of just another 15 units of titanium in waste. As at this point, we're making 10.12% profit on this blueprint at ME 229, which would take us at a pause 9 days to research, which is not bad. But for ammo blueprints, you can really go hog wild. But for other things later on, like especially ships, it's a lot less benefit. Like, for example, let's go back down here to half of that amount. Let's say 100. I'm still making a 10.09% profit at ME 90. And that's only 3 days worth of research. So really that extra amount of time in the lab is not worth it. Especially the amount of that you're going to be spending either on lab fees at a public lab, and also the amount of time you're going to have to wait to get it into the slot in a public lab, or if you're at a POS, the amount of fuel that you're using to do that research. Okay. So we have all this here. Let's take a look at the next few tabs here. We have batch resources. What this basically does is just give you specific batch data on what you're going to need for this batch, our 15 runs. And it'll also give you here the volume for each of those items. So if you're buying it from someplace, you can see how much you're going to need to transport these materials. For example, here for this, we'll just need 273.3 cubic meters of cargo space, and our total batch value is going to be 228,000 ISK. Now these other tabs here, let's see, there are no components for this. You'll see these in Tech 2 and some very advanced Tech 1 blueprints. Now on the Resources Owned tab, what you can do is you can select a character, and it will show how much of this material is required, how much you already have, and then what your surplus of it will be after the production is done. If you ever see surpluses here in the negatives, that means you're going to need to buy that amount in order to do it. And if you pull down the tabs here, it'll tell you where those resources are located, so you don't get stuck with, oh, I have all this here, and then realize, oh, wait a minute, most of it is 5 jumps away, and I only have 2 pieces of titanium here, when I thought I had everything. Okay, so now we'll go to one more thing here. PE research. Now this also is on a logarithmic scale, so the more you research, the less benefit you're going to get. And just to show you here, let's pull this up to 1,000 runs. So this would produce 100,000 rounds of ammo. And at PE 0, it would take 2 days, 18 hours to run. But let's turn this up here. As we increase our production efficiency research, the amount of time goes down. But notice here, let me go back to 0. Our first few runs, we get hours worth of benefit. But by the time we get up to even PE 10, now each run is only giving us minutes worth of benefit. And usually on a lot of blueprints, yeah, once you get up into the 50s, you see we're at 50, now we're just getting seconds worth of benefit per level. So you'll have to figure out for your own what you think is worth it. And that about covers everything for the blueprint calculator here. It's at least for basic production runs. Now the other thing you can do here is you can click on Save Job. Now what this will do is you type in a name, and it will save the job. I'm not going to do it here for this one because I don't want to put in this for the blueprint I don't have. But it will save the job over here in the production manager. Now what the production manager does is it allows you to get a quick look at the profitability for each item that you've saved. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here is this does not automatically update. You have to update these manually. However, if you click on refresh job costing and profits, notice there are only these two updated. So what you will have to do is actually go through here, scroll down, and this can take a little while based on price updates. This is just because of some quirk in how the programming is done. But after you've scrolled through all of them, click refresh job costs and profits, and it'll refresh all of them. Or you can just go through and do them one item at a time. But then also if you're here, you'll select on, let's take a look at large anti-EM screen reinforcers Tech 2 here. You'll get over here, you can get the listings of materials and all that stuff that you would from the BP calculator. Which also this gives an example to show you what would happen with a more advanced blueprint. Like for example here, to build these, I'm going to need to have RAM shield techs. Now what these are is another item which I could also build from a separate blueprint. Like for example here I can uncheck it and then it'll figure I'm buying these off the market. If I check here, it'll set the material level. It'll assume I am building them myself. So if you pull this down, it'll show the resources that are going into each of those components. And if we go over to batch resources, again we have everything we needed. And then component production, what this basically is just telling me how many of these RAMs I'm going to have to build for the job. Under batch resources, it's showing the minerals that'll go into those RAMs. And then over here, how many of them I need to make. So I guess that pretty much concludes the basic EveHQ here. And I will be going for now and giving you some more at a later date.